The truth will set you free. People didn't know. Beneath the ice there weren't corpses, there was a hymn. Snow covered it, but the sound never stopped. From the day I heard that song, I was no longer a prisoner who had survived. I was a witness. Winter arrived in Hamjuong before it arrived on the map. From the first day to the last, the snow fell with the same expression. I was assigned between those expressions. In the camp where names were replaced with numbers, I was both a nurse orderly and a prisoner. We called it a ward, but it was nothing like a hospital. Dark corridors, rime creeping through window frames, scissors and bandages sterilized in ice-cold water. The bandages weren't white but a sickly gray. Blood froze. The ice didn't melt. Every morning the roll sheet came around. Instead of names, boxes increased and decreased. I counted the empty spaces. Death was marked like an absence. I didn't rub out those boxes with an eraser. Partly because there was no eraser, but mostly because I'd learned that erasing didn't make things disappear. On the chart I wrote not body temperature but the length of breath. Short, short, very short. Each day the edge of the desk grew sharper. As the edges sharpened, we lost our round things: laughter, names, the warmth of hands. I boiled needles up to 3 times. The sterilizing room held an even heavier cold. Rubber gloves soaked up moisture and froze by dawn. When rubber froze, my fingers lost sensation. Feeling a pulse with numb hands, a person's life came not as numbers but as sound: a faint thud, a beat's rest, and another thud. Miss that sound and the person vanished. What I feared most wasn't vanishing, but silent vanishing, the way a single number drops without a scream or a wail. At the last cots lived the cough that came every winter, sneezes with blood, broken breathing, the temperature of a cup of water. Between them floated the forbidden words, whispered low: God, gospel, hymn. They weren't objects but warmth moving through the room. Someone would whisper, someone would answer with silence. Even silence had kind: silence to survive, silence to pass things on. I hadn't learned either completely, and so I froze somewhere in between. One day an old man was carried in. All his fingers were cracked, soil packed hard beneath his nails. They say he sings hymns, one guard muttered as he held the stretcher. The moment the word hymn passed down the corridor, the air changed. I looked at the old man's lips. From the chapped gaps slipped syllables thin as wind. It wasn't a sound, and yet it was. That night I sat long by his bed. Water. He barely spoke. I touched lukewarm water dipped from beneath a slab of ice to his lips. Closing his eyes, he whispered, the song goes down under the ice, it never stops. I couldn't tell whether that was a metaphor or a fact. On night duty I could see the stream outside the ward. In winter its whole surface froze, turned silver. When wind blew, the ice hummed, very faintly. The sound came not through the ear but through the sternum. The old windows never missed that vibration. The glass translated the wind for us. It was more reliable than a weather report. It meant the ice was shifting little by little, that water still flowed below, that even if we were frozen on top, somewhere under us there was movement. At noon came inspection. Under the cots, in drawers, in the bandage bins. The state security officer's gaze was a blade, and the air split where the blade passed. Possession of banned media leads to connected investigation. The sentence had been chalked on the board long ago and fused with the dust. The snow was thicker that day. The officer glanced at me and drew another line: leniency for confession. Leniency felt colder than a knife point. I lowered my head. My eyes stopped on a wet mark on the floor. Spilled water. Someone's leftover breath. The day after the old man left, an empty place appeared in the ward. The cot was soon filled, but the gap remained. I folded a bandage and laid it there. No one asked, no one looked. At the evening meeting, the political instructor said, ideology runs deeper than blood. Whenever I heard that, I thought the reverse. If blood stops, can ideology still flow? If ideology stops, can songs still flow? Under the ice. Without stopping. One day a strange vibration came from outside. The stream's ice heaved like taking a long breath. I pressed my ear to the window. Very low, but unmistakably rhythmic. Not a rule, but something translated by the heart. At that moment a young prisoner, between coughs, gathered breath and murmured, He does not forget. I wrote that sentence in the chart's margin. It wasn't needed in medical records, but it felt more accurate than the day's temperatures. On the night of the first ice rain, I crossed a line for the first time. After lights out, I slipped through the back door of the ward to the stream. The wind cut my neck, my breath turned to steam. Snow lay evenly pressed across the ice. Rising on my heels, I eased forward. The ice hummed low. The song goes down under the ice, it never stops. The old man's words returned. I laid my ear on the ice, and far away I heard a sound made of many breaths, not any one person's voice. It wasn't speech, but it was surely a hymn. Not melody, but sustain. A sustain that did not end. After that I went to the same spot every night. The ice thickened, the sound grew lower. The lower it went, the deeper it became. Returning to the ward, my fingers were so frozen I felt nothing, yet inside my chest, warmth gathered. I wanted to pass that warmth on to someone, like a syringe, a cup of water, a folded bandage. But not only matter can be passed on. I learned under the ice how to endure, how to wait, how to count my breath. Winter lingered long, and inside me, I felt my own ice turning little by little to water. Water finds a way. If there's a wall, it bends. If it's blocked, it seeps. The ward's nights stayed the same, the boxes on the inspection board kept shrinking, but I knew this: apart from what we lose, there is what remains. Not sound, but testimony. Testimony that had already begun though not yet spoken. It went down under the ice, and there, it did not stop. The day I decided to make a record of the sounds beneath the ice, I drew lines on paper. Not music, not sentences, just durations and intervals. With a nurse's hand I traced the ice's breathing as if charting an EKG. When the wind shifted, the sound lowered. When it snowed, the sound dulled. But subtract barometric pressure and temperature and one thing remained: the closer someone's heart drew, the clearer the sound became. It wasn't science, but it was undeniable. That evening 2 young prisoners pushed in a stretcher. One had a shoulder wound, the other's lips were pale. As I'd add disinfectant I asked, "Ever been to the stream at night?" After a long pause he dipped his head the slightest bit. "There, why yes." He swallowed the end. I didn't ask more. Wrapping the bandage, I whispered, "Don't bring what you hear there back into the ward. If you do, the air in here will shatter." He stared. "Then how?" I answered, "Send yourself down under the ice. Sound remains whole only where it belongs." Night after night lying on the ice thinned my body. My bones learned winter by becoming cold. On the thinnest night I recited my number instead of my name. The number vanished quickly, the name did not. The way the nameless recover their names there, beneath the ice, it had begun. When I recalled the young prisoner's words, "He does not forget," the ice turned a little more transparent. Inspections grew more frequent. The officers steered flashlights like moving pupils. We'd heard rumors of a ward where a radio had been found beneath a cot, and the same questions fell on us. Who turned it on? Who listened? Who spoke? I didn't prepare answers. I prepared what not to lift into words. Not speaking and hiding are different. Hiding packs the earth hard. Not speaking keeps soil damp. Dampness allows root. With the ear you have just before sleep, I heard roots going down. One day a woman took the old man's place. Fine cuts lined her wrists. Her eyes were astonishingly calm. "How did you get hurt?" I asked. She smiled briefly. "I got hurt carrying the hymn." My hands stopped. "How do you carry it?" She pointed at the window. "If you carry it with words, it disappears. You have to carry it with breath." Between coughs she hummed very low. I couldn't tell the tune, but the air in the ward sank a notch. In that lowered air, shoulders eased. In that moment I understood the sound under the ice, and the ward's breath had a way of recognizing each other. She prayed very short prayers each night. I didn't write them down written, the sentences could be inspected. Instead I wrote numbers beside her. Inhale 4, exhale 5. Hold 1. The rest beat was always short. The shorter, the deeper. The deeper, the closer to song. Song lived in the between word and word, breath and breath, stopping and starting again. I listened to that between for a long time. The longer I listened, the thinner the silence grew. Past midnight a radio detection truck's light swept the window, rectangles of light ironing the floor. Just when the ward door might have opened, she looked at me. Now we shorten our breath. Only with the shape of her mouth the whole ward quieted. As long as breaths were shortened, no one vanished. I wrote the truth large in the margin: shortened breath, extension of the time to live. It didn't matter if no one else read it. I had to learn it, and later I would have to testify to it. On a day when the snow grew heavier, the ice revealed a fine crack. Pressing my earlobe to the surface, I moved along the crack's direction. The crack linked like notes. The ice was a score, the wind, a metronome. We were the choir that hadn't learned yet. The sound didn't call us, it simply made room. The room wasn't warm, but it was safe. It wasn't safe, but it was true. That night, returning to the ward, I changed a sentence in my heart for the first time. From "I am a prisoner" to "I am a witness." A witness is someone who repeats the same sound, who passes on what was heard, unchanged. To avoid adding myself, I listened longer, lower, slower, for longer. That day the wind blew from the east. An east wind makes snow smaller and ears larger. Closing the back door, brushing my footprints away, I went to the stream. The ice looked like cloud. The cloud moved, the ice stood still. What flowed beneath the still surface? That was the sanctuary I sought that night. I lay down. I pressed my ear to the ice and folded my hands behind my back. My body's weight pulled into the ear. At first there was nothing. I shortened my breathing a little more. My chest flattened, my spine thinned. Then from deep below a very brief unison rose. Not a single note, but a weave of many breaths. The kind of thing that disappears if turned into words. I closed my eyes. While the ear saw, the eyes listened. He does not forget. A sentence broke free from the unison and circled. I didn't know who spoke: the old man, the young prisoner, the woman in the ward, or someone I'd never met. But one thing was sure: the sentence had been written with many breaths. I repeated it inside. The more I repeated, the clearer the sound became. Someone laid a very low harmony. Then someone else, and someone else. In that moment I experienced fear losing its direction. Usually fear comes from the front doors, footsteps, questions, records. But the sound beneath the ice pulled fear downward. Down, fear became weight that pressed my body more firmly, and the more pressed, the less I scattered. Only those who don't scatter can say the next line. I whispered, very softly, "I am here." The ice didn't answer. The water sent up a small bubble. The bubble didn't stay trapped, it slid long beneath the ice and disappeared. Prayer was like that, uncatchable, yet remaining. Footsteps behind me. I didn't rise. I lifted my ear just enough to turn toward the sound. The steps stopped. The wind flipped once. "Who's there?" A low voice. I knew whose voice it was at once. A sentry's spacing, a guard's breathing, the pitch of a question. I didn't answer. The sound beneath the ice had already taught me how to be silent. Silence was not escape but staying. If I stayed, the footsteps tired first. They lingered like a ghost, then turned back. New snow covered them. When I returned, she was awake. Seeing my fingertips, she smiled. "You smell of ice." I didn't hide my hands. "Is it still flowing there?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Then we can endure today." Her line wasn't medicine, but it lasted longer than medicine. That night inspection crashed in again. Flashlights were pale, questions repeated. "Who turned it on?" I didn't answer. I kept on, not lifting what I'd heard into words. The officer's eyes paused, then moved away. Where they paused stood the woman. She neither raised nor lowered her head, her gaze just off the straight line. It was the expression of someone breathing to sing. I saw courage in her face. Courage isn't size, it's direction. Not forward, but down under the ice. After the inspection, the ward grew quieter. The quieter it grew, the clearer we heard each other's breathing. Some a little longer, some a little shorter. I learned how to match lengths to breathe together. It was preparation for a choir. A choir isn't adding more sound, it's emptying the spaces. When empty, someone's sound can enter. Once inside, It stopped being mine, it became ours. That night I wrote at the top of the page the hymn Beneath the Ice, the unison of those who remain. And I promised myself one day I would turn this record into sound, hand it to someone. A confession already begun though not yet spoken, the confession that would help me endure tomorrow's questions. At dawn they called me out. The quarter in the basement stayed at a constant temperature, and the fact of that constancy felt colder. When the door opened, a bulb hung heavy over my head. A chair, a table, paper. The paper was already full of sentences, only a few blanks remained: names, times, places. Tapping the page with his pen, the interrogator said, "Let's keep it simple." Who sang? Who listened? Where did it start? I was silent, not the silence of refusing to tell, but the silence of choosing what to hear. He laughed, short as a yawn. Leniency for confession. I knew what leniency meant. A word meant not only for me but for someone else. I didn't take the pen. Instead I recalled the smell of ice left on the back of my hand. That smell doesn't make sentences, it stops them. They say you write useless lines in medical records, he said. Things like "he does not forget." I lifted my head. That line was more accurate than a temperature. The words surprised me first. He underlined them with his pen. Accurate? We make the diagnosis. No, I said quietly. Life makes the diagnosis. We only copy it down. Late. He set the pen aside. For a moment only the bulb's faint vibration moved in the room. Fine, then what does life say? That the sound under the ice outlives us. My answer wasn't prepared, but it wasn't a lie. He tilted his head. You mean God? He forced out the word with an awkward smile. When that word is spoken aloud, I said, the room splits. And from that crack, breath comes out. His eyes wavered. Who taught you this? The ice, I said, honestly. He didn't laugh again. After a long look, he slid the paper toward me. Then we'll hold the ice responsible. I picked up the pen and wrote only one line in a blank: I will not pass on what I have heard. He raised his eyebrows. Then no one will remember you. It didn't feel like a threat, it felt like a fact. But I knew not being remembered is different from disappearing. There is a silence that does not vanish. The interrogation wasn't long, but its end was. In the quarter the heat left the back of my neck fast. I knew the sound under the ice wouldn't stop that night either. Even if I disappeared, the sound would remain in the present tense. So before I stepped out, I looked up and asked him, have you ever heard it, even once? He didn't answer. He pointed to the door. Go. I walked, and as I walked, I wrote the sentence of testimony in my heart slowly, clearly. At dusk the ward hurt most when the day's medicine wore off and the night's cold hadn't yet arrived. The thing that filled that gap wasn't medicine or reports, it was unison. I met her eyes. She nodded slightly. Tonight we empty the space. A few patients evened their breaths. No one started a song. We waited instead for arrival, like bubbles rising under ice. At first nothing. Second, we heard each other's hearts. Third, the wind speed approached from far off. And fourth, her ribcage trembled, laying down the lowest tone. No lyrics. Uncatchable, therefore untellable. I watched the tone soak into the walls, the window frames, the grain of the cots. Invisible, and yet I clearly saw it. Someone coughed. It might have broken the rhythm, instead it opened a channel. Through the crack the next tone entered, then another, then another. The unison did not grow louder, it grew deeper. The deeper, the quieter. In that quiet I closed my eyes and recalled the old man. The song goes down under the ice, it never stops. Tonight we did not raise the song. We deliberately sent it down lower, and lower still. Footsteps outside. A sentry spacing. The doorknob turned. The ward did not stop. We emptied more space. The footsteps stepped into the emptiness, found no place to stay, and scattered. Flashlights washed the walls, labels and charts flashed. Then she breathed out very briefly and left a last tone like a trace. It wasn't the shape of sound, it was air's memory. The door shut, the steps faded. Only then someone cried, briefly. The cry was short, the breath of release was long. That night, closing my log, I knew the unison hadn't hidden us. It had shown who we are. In the unison, the names of those called only by number returned. Not spoken, yet known. I ran my fingers over the paper. I'd pressed too hard with my pencil. What remained wasn't a sentence but a decision. Even if I disappear, this sound will remain. Spring didn't come at once. The ice groaned first, then water moved at last. Names returned. The windows were no longer clouded with rime, yet I opened them less. Instead I closed my ears less. What I heard with ears left open wasn't cheering but margin. Margin doesn't mean a story has ended, it's the mark that it continues. When the last page of my notebook was nearly full, a blank envelope lay on my desk. No sender. Inside, a slip of paper with one line in red ink: truth can never be bound. I traced the slight ridges of the ink with my fingertips. The ink had dried, the sentence had not. Folding it into my breast pocket, I pictured faces: the old man, the young prisoner, the woman, and many I didn't know. Their breaths passed through me. They passed and remained. At night I still went to the stream. The ice was gone, the water found its path. I didn't call the sound of water a hymn. I called it continuance. Hymns can pause, but continuance doesn't. The current brushed my leg and made small waves. Riding those waves were nameless names. What I thought I'd lost had not left me at all. I couldn't show that proof to anyone. So I chose to testify, to speak what can't be shown, to hold what can't be held with silence. Sometimes, when the wind turns, I close my eyes and recall the words unison. It didn't grow, it deepened and quieted. In that quiet we learned each other's breath. With the breath we learned, we endure today and wait for tomorrow. Waiting isn't weakness, it's readiness. Readiness makes no sound, yet goes farther than sound. On the last line of my notebook I wrote, I am not a prisoner, I am a witness. The hymn beneath the ice has not stopped. Tomorrow it will continue in someone's breath. I closed the notebook. The closing made a very small sound, but the silence that followed was long. In that long silence I knew, even if no one knows my name, even if my number is forgotten, he does not forget. That is enough. On the way back from the water, a pinch of snow scattered like winter's last greeting to spring. I raised my hand to catch it. It melted slowly, and because it was slow, it stayed longer. As if transferring remaining moisture onto the paper in my pocket, I moved the day's breathing into my chest. And very quietly, I said, I bear witness today as well. Thank you for watching this story.